The 4 stages to achieve success, the environment, psychology, planning and process. The environment is, of course, all around us, okay? It's the job market, it's where we are, and the main thing there is to be as familiar with it as possible, you know, to really understand what's going on. So we're in the city and I'm in finance, so forgive me if I'm a little bit skewed when I give examples or talk about particular industries, but let's talk about finance. It's understanding as much as possible about the sector even before you make an application, even before you consider what you want to do next. What are we doing? What's the area we're in? It could be that you're in another sector, for example, in law or in accountancy or something like that. It's the same. Understanding one's environment and really knowing what's going on. You know, knowing who the main players are, you know, what the main job functions are, you know, what are the international interactions. So just a familiarity with one's environment. Psychology, I mean, that's, to be honest, I mean, I could have put, by the way, this is copyright Roy Bean. This is not my text, but I'm freely plagiarising it as we speak, right? So psychology, to be honest, you could put self there. I think, and I'm sure Roy, I've got your definition right there, because it's your own attitude and approach. An employment career, by necessity, takes a long time, right? You know, unless we win the lottery or you get an inheritance, we're basically working for 30, 40 odd years, and that demands an approach. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It demands a very patient approach, a very thick-skinned approach. You know, for example, there are hurdles to overcome, whether it's in a promotion or in securing a job or an advancement. There are hurdles to overcome, and I know 1 or 2 people that don't seem to have any problem overcoming hurdles, but that's rare. Every time you fall at one stage, one has to be mentally resilient. Okay, forgive me for just stating the obvious, but it's worth repeating. Okay, psychology, the strength of your own self, your own mental toughness is very important. The third point, planning. And I've got a bit more detail on that a bit later on, okay, when we talk about how one researches the market or the company or your target, if it's a new company, before even taking a first step, before going into an interview. So we'll talk about that a bit later in some more detail. But it is very important, planning. Don't leave things to chance. Don't wing it, okay? I know interview preparation, and there is a session later on interview technique. One can't say it enough. The trouble is, the best way to get good at interviews, actually I think the only way to get good at interviews, is to just have a lot of them. Yeah, there's no substitute for every time you walk in. And you know, the problem with an interview is, I mean, if it was only down to you, most of us would get the job because we're prepared, we're motivated, we're energetic, we've done our homework. You know, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We're good workers. Unfortunately, you've got one person, or sometimes 3, 4, 5. I've once had 6 people in front of me in a panel. And by the way, anyone ever gone for a job at an American investment bank? I mean, the interview process itself, you'd probably go through about, well, in my day, it was about 15 odd interviews. It's probably 30 now, right? Because they want to make sure the entire bank has interviewed you. But what's the point I'm making? There is the unknown, the bit that's out of your control, which is sat opposite you, which is the interviewer or interviewers, okay? Some of them are good. They know how to make an interview actually a decent, not a waste of time. And some of them are incredibly poor. Unfortunately, seniority does not grant good interviewing technique, okay? I've met chairmen who are absolute buffoons, okay? On the other hand, I've been interviewed by more junior people who actually turn it into a conversation, and we'll talk about that later as well, okay? So, because there is an element of luck, I'm afraid there is, the best you can do is to be as prepared as possible, and then try your best to turn it into a conversation where you can demonstrate your skills. Unfortunately, that's not always possible because of the quality of the person sitting opposite you. But we'll come to that later, okay? So the planning is very, very important. And of course, finally, says Eve sending over his notes, there's process. And that is the process of the application itself. You know, starting with a CV writing. I think there's a workshop later on CV writing. Standing out, getting noticed. And we'll talk about that as well, okay? But of course, it's not just the CV. There's the covering letter. Gosh, if there's anything that's art and not science, it's the covering letter. How does one tackle a covering letter? You know, there's infinite variety in the covering letter. If you said to me what makes a good covering letter, I could show you a template, okay? And I would also tell you that in my personal experience, it's successful probably no more than 50% of the time. And yet you're saying to me, well, that's pretty poor, Morad. It's just a letter. If you don't even get the first stage to get an interview less than half the time, okay, then what's the point? Unfortunately, different people respond to covering letters in different ways. We're all very different, aren't we? So whereas a template I show you might work for one person, someone else might just chuck it in the bin. Remember what was it? Yeah, The Office. Remember The Office? You know, with this. He's not particularly funny, is he? But David Brent was a proper buffoon. But anyway, do you remember The Office? What was his CV technique? Well, he just picked up a pile of CVs and chucked half of them in the bin. I believe in luck. Now, that's not that far from the truth, I bet. I bet. I've seen people turn down who are like 100% shoe-ins for the job because their CV is 100% on target. And yet someone will say, when we're having a committee to review the applicants, someone will say, well, I didn't think he would fit in. And I'm thinking, are you for real? So do you see what I mean? We can't control that. But we have to try and control as much that's on our side as possible, okay? So there's the covering letter. What's the best way to do that? There's social media. There's interview techniques. We'll come to that. There's negotiating. There's the networking. That's all the process. And we'll come into that in more detail as well. The staircase of preparation. So there's 5 levels, if you like, in this preparation process. Actually, they're not discrete. They kind of merge into each other. I hope that will become apparent as we go through it. They're not distinct, separate stages, I don't think. I hope you don't mind me saying that. They kind of merge into each other, okay? They're not like discrete, okay, now I'm going to the next step. But they are distinct in that you can recognize them as different parts of the process, but they kind of merge into each other naturally, I think. First, so there's the basement, we're at the bottom, first floor, second, third floor, and then the roof terrace. I like that. The roof terrace, not the 4th floor, but the roof terrace. Very nice. Okay, so think of the 5-step process, and we're going to go into this in some more detail now. Okay, first, the basement. Website, social media, CV, and experience. So the basement, that is indeed the baseline. It is where one starts. Okay, positioning yourself to start this journey, this 5-step journey. Okay, positioning yourself. The website, social media. So first of all, you have the absolute minimum. By the way, pretty much everyone is doing this, okay? We'll talk about LinkedIn in a minute, okay, for example. You've got understanding the market or your target company. You've got the social media presence. And by the way, I can't reiterate this often enough, be very, 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 is that enough varies? Very careful about your social media presence, because A, it's permanent, and B, anyone can find it and see it if they're looking for it, okay? So, I personally, by the way, this is not a recommendation, I personally, probably because of my age, right? I'm an old man, right? I don't use Facebook or Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn, okay? Lots of people are on Facebook and Twitter. Fine, that's no problem, that's fine. All I'm saying is, when you yourself are establishing a presence, posting anything, writing anything, just be aware that it can be spotted by anyone to infinity. Someone could find it 10 years later, or indeed 30. I'm seeing some young people. So 30 years later, when they're going for the chairman or the chairwoman role at some FTSE 100 company, and someone sees something you posted on Twitter or Facebook 30 years previously, and the job is sunk. Okay. Or nowadays in the city, the whole senior positions are all approved by the regulator. I'm not saying you've got to never use it. It's important to establish a presence, especially on something like LinkedIn. Just be aware that anything you write can be spotted by anyone or seen anytime in the future. Okay, that's all. So that's the basement is basically what everyone does. It's the baseline. Everyone has got a CV. The first floor. In fact, I think the basement segues, or is it segue? I think segue. Segues quite nicely into the first floor. They're actually quite connected, okay, because it's a natural progression from it, okay. Researching the target, looking at LinkedIn, Google. I'll talk about LinkedIn a bit further in a moment. Understanding the company. Okay, use Google, use the internet to understand your target. Now, for example, you're working, an accounting firm, a law firm, a public sector. Is it progression within the own firm that you're interested in, or is it moving across to another firm? Research the market, understand the market, really get to know the market that this firm operates in, everything about it, and this takes time. Okay, that's what I meant about. In the same way that one shouldn't wing it at the interview, in the same way one shouldn't just wing it. When looking at what company to apply for, really get to know what the company is doing. Is this a place I want to work? What really like? What do we think it's like to work there? Do they have things that attract me? Okay, so really understand them. Sign up to a company that has a new service, if you're interested in it. Sign up to things like Google Alerts. Sign up to your target so you get everything about them. You get it in your inbox. You can research it straight away. Okay. Similar for company information. Understand what's going on. Company literature. Read up about it. Okay. Again, one needs to be proactive. One needs to demonstrate at the interview that one has done one's homework and knows everything about the company. Okay. Finally, interviews, LinkedIn profile. Now, LinkedIn. Let's just have a word about LinkedIn here. Actually, it's a very powerful tool. It can, no, as you were. It can be a very powerful tool. Does everyone have a LinkedIn profile? Yeah? Okay. Sorry, I'm not allowed to ask questions. You can't ask me, I can't ask you. Does everyone have, no, it can be a very powerful tool. But like any social media, like anything, like, I don't know, internet dating, I don't know about that. It can be like anything. You have to sort the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, okay? So from your perspective, establish a strong profile, have the photo, have the experience, have the educational background on there, get people to recommend you or endorse you for skills. Get a full profile, okay? But, make each section succinct. You don't want to write War and Peace in a LinkedIn profile, no one will read it. But in terms of employment history, you've got your companies in there, 2 or 3 sentences, no more, on your experience, your responsibilities. A bit like a CV. When you write a CV, for each job, there should be a short section on responsibilities and a short section on achievements. But make it as succinct as possible. From the other perspective, in terms of researching a company, or if you have an interview coming up, it's also a useful tool in that you can use it to find out about someone who's about to interview you. So, okay, you've got an email come through, thanks for sending us your application. Can you come along for an interview with such and such, Joe Bloggs, on such and such date? First of all, you look up Joe Bloggs on the profile. Don't ask to connect with him, okay? But read up about the chap. Find out about him, okay? Whoever you're interviewing with, okay? So that's important. It's a useful tool for that. Now, they will see that you've looked at their profile. Great, fantastic. Shows that you're finding out about the chap you're about to have a meeting with, the person, whoever, he or she. You're about to have an interview with someone, and they're seeing that. Great. So look at their profile, find out about them. It may be that you have a connection that they have as well, so you have a common connection. If that's the case, then you could ask to connect with that person, but send an introductory note saying, I've got an interview with such and such. It'd be good to spend 10 minutes of your time just to find out more about the company. So you can use that as part of your research, because that's all the first floor. And again, it's still pretty much at the starting point. All good candidates should be doing that anyway, so you won't be alone if you're doing that, okay? The first and the second floor merge into each other quite naturally. Finding out about the target, finding out about the person you're interviewing with, finding out about contacts in common, and letting them know discreetly, because they'd have seen you look at their profile, or someone will tell them, oh, I got a call from such and such, that you're interested. I myself have fallen down at this second floor. I myself, just recently, have had, okay, I must declare I'll declare something here. I myself have not done this, even though this is great. I myself have just recently, within the last 12 months, whether it was for a non-exec role, or it's some other interview type thing, not an approval interview, and I've seen the name, and I just thought, okay, fine, It was almost to my discredit. There was almost an element of arrogance coming in on my part. He can't know as much about finance as me. Who cares who he is? Bad, wrong, okay? A mistake on my part, okay? No matter how senior or experienced you are, it's always worth doing what we've just said in the first and the second floor. Don't leave it to chance. If there's no information about, let's say this chap doesn't have a LinkedIn profile. It's like Mr. Unknown, right? No one knows him. In fact, I know a lot of senior people in banks, and they don't have no profile at all. They don't do anything. They just come in 9 to 5, draw their check, and go. But anyway, if that's the case, there's nothing you can do about it. I myself have fallen down here, but I recommend it, okay? Because it makes you stand out. It gets you mentally prepared for this test you're about to have, okay? Second floor and first floor, they kind of merge into each other. The third floor, again, it's a natural progression. This one takes a bit of wearing out of shoe leather as well. So again, you're being proactive. You're using your energy and your time. Experience the organization, customers and suppliers. Now, what does that mean? Now, if it's a bank, it's quite straightforward to experience it. You can walk into their branch, unless, of course, it's one of these newfangled banks. Well, if it's an internet company, if it's a Monzo, that's harder to do, okay? So maybe you could experience their suppliers, who they deal with. Is there some other interaction they have that you can somehow experience and get to know? All the third floor is about is knowing, being familiar with the firm and who the firm deals with. What's their profile like? I mean, the last thing you want to do is do all this hard work, wow them at the interview, get the job offer, start the job, and find out that they're a discredited company that everybody loathes and despises. Okay? A bit like getting a job at Tony Blair's press office. No, okay. Find out about the organisation. Find out who they interact with, who they deal with. Okay? That takes effort and proactive energy. Okay? You can wear out shoe leather. Visiting a branch, visiting the shop. Okay? But it's worth doing. Okay? It gets you in the mindset to understand the firm better and understand what the people are like. Okay? And we'll talk about the importance of that a bit later with interview technique, because at the end of the day, at an interview, they want to check that you fit in with the team. Okay, then finally, we are right up on the top floor, the roof terrace, and I like that photo as well. Okay? Now, what do we mean by that? The best way to get good at researching a company and finding out about the market that it operates in and its customers and suppliers is to do it lots of times. Okay? So it's not time wasted. If you get there, the chap is an absolute bumbling buffoon, asks all the wrong questions, sits there, twiddles his thumbs, and then that's half an hour, 45 minutes of your life wasted, and he never asked a single question that you researched. That's life. Okay? But it wouldn't have been time wasted that you were preparing. Okay? Now that's the summary. What's the 90-day plan? Now this I like a lot. I mean, I should have maybe done it. This I like a lot. It takes effort and research and time, but it's worth doing. Imagine, you do this before the interview. Imagine that you already work there. So you'd have already digested, you digested it in your sleep, so you could recite it in your sleep. You'd have already digested the job description, the role. The recruiter would have sent it to you, or the company would have sent it to you direct when you applied, okay? You've already digested that. Imagine that you are in the role. So the chap says, yeah, great. When can you start? You say, tomorrow. So just imagine you start. Have in your head or draw up some hypothetical 90-day plan as to what you would do in your first 90 days or 100 days in the job. Okay, what would you do? What sort of things would you look to change or to improve? Change is the wrong word. To improve or to review or to enhance. So first, get familiar with what role you're going for. That's the job description. Find out as much as possible about that job beyond the job description as you can, and that's where a conversation with a common contact of the interviewer would help. Or if the recruiter can get you someone to talk to at the firm, it would help because you can find out more about the role. And armed with those two bits of information, a conversation with someone who works there or in the team, and the job description, you would then think, okay, what would I do if I got the job? Okay, it doesn't have to be War and Peace. 4 or 5 things, enough to fill, say, 2-3 slides of PowerPoint, large font, okay? Have that in your head, because when you get there, the minute you have an opportunity, you would say to the interviewer, yeah, I mean, I was just thinking if I was in that role, I would consider doing this, this, and this. Now, that should impress the interviewer. I say should, because if the interviewer is an open and transparent person who appreciates initiative, then one can't help but be impressed by that. But it shows initiative, it shows research, it shows a proactive mindset, okay? And that has to impress. You would start with a caveat by saying, look, I don't know the ins and outs of the firms, I've never worked here, but I am familiar with what the job requires, and here's what I'd like to do. What do you think? Okay? You don't say it in a kind of offhand, this is what I do. You say, this strikes me as worth doing in the first 100 days I'm here. What do you think of that? The interview should be impressed by that. Okay? So it's definitely worth doing. And that is, I think, the key to success. So what are interviews looking for? Now, interview technique, it's, like I said, don't be intimidated by it, but use it as an opportunity to tell people about how good you are, how appropriate you are for this job, okay? What is the interviewer looking for, okay? Oh, just get the basic stuff done out of the way, in terms of attire, you want to be a little bit smarter than the person sat opposite you, in terms of punctuality, if it's a trip, I mean, I had to take the train over to, the intercity over to, do they still call it that these days? I'll take the intercity over to Wales, I researched the time, I made sure I was there in good time, don't be late, all that usual stuff. I'm assuming you do all the usual stuff, the normal stuff. Now, what is the interviewer looking for? Well, of course, I'm going to start with this second one, and I'm going to word it as, what are you going to bring to the party? Okay, they want to find out, what are you bringing to the party? What's your qualifications? Why do you think you can do it? At the same time, they will want to check your motivation? Why do you want it? Some interviewers will ask, what makes you tick? What's your motivation in life? The best interviewers, I think, will ask you questions like, I don't know, what team sports did you do? What do you do outside of work? Unfortunately, you don't get that so often these days. Interviews have got to follow certain rules. Clearly, you can't, break the law. You can't say something like, how old are you? I mean, that's just illegal, right? But nowadays, interviews become quite scripted, so they don't necessarily allow that two-way conversation that I think the best interviewers are. But you should be asked, or you should be looking to answer these questions, either indirectly or if you've not been asked them directly. What can you bring to the party? And what's your motivation for it? What energizes you? What gets you out of bed in the morning? The third one, unfortunately, is kind of out of your domain, but we must be aware of it. I am aware from a lot of research that I've read that, by the way, before I leave that second one, this is your opportunity to really shine, of course. You know in advance, at some point, there's going to be a form of question that is along the lines of, okay, what's your skills? What can you bring to the party? Why should I hire you? Okay, if you get a kind of stress interview, like sell me this pen, or these kind of ridiculous nonsense ones, I don't take them seriously anymore. I went to Credit Suisse just recently, senior job, right? Bearing in mind I've been in the city 28 years, okay? Senior position, I got the chap who's a peer. It would have been another C-suite. Sat opposite me. He's not going to be my boss. He would have been a peer of mine. And he starts with a question. Oh, there's 90 floors on this floor. You can only do down to, what do you do to get on the second floor? I'm thinking, are you for real? And I actually said, look, if this is some sort of intelligence test, or can I think of my feet? I'm not going to pass this. Could we move on to the proper interview? Otherwise, I don't want to waste your time. And he was like, oh, okay. Well, do you don't want to answer it? Well, I said, look, I don't want to spend the next half an hour going through my IQ, right? But listen, I'm not saying that's what you should do. No, because I could afford to slip and look, I don't need this. Hey, I'm thinking you're a prat, but I didn't say that. I just walked out. Now, you don't want to walk away from an interview because you want the job. What I would recommend is if you get that kind of, see this, I've had it before. I'll show it to you. See this pen here, sell it to me. I've had that question. Now, when I was a youngster, when I was asked it, I did say, see this pen? It's the latest deluxe model. Let me tell you about it. Can I ship it? If someone asked me that now, I would say, really? Do we really need to have this? Are you testing my sales skills? Can I then prepare it? Because I would never do a sales job just on the fly. Can I come back tomorrow and prepare it? I would. If you get that kind of nonsense stress question, okay, you might also get the nonsense kind of, do you work well under pressure? No, I cave in under pressure. That's why I'm looking for an easy gig. Now, but I wouldn't say it in a way that's facetious. I would say, well, what do you expect me to say? Naturally, I work well under pressure. That's why I'm going for this job. But you don't give them the answer because these are silly questions. What's your weakness? My weakness is I work too hard. Yeah, I spend 20 hours a day. My wife won't talk to me. That you have to push back. Now, I can afford to say this. Be careful. If you really want the job and you want to impress the fellow, then maybe you don't want to push back. But I'm saying it's not worth it to just let this interview take you for a ride, okay? But so I'm hoping you don't get a kind of stress interview because they're so 1980s, it's ridiculous. Now, get the basic stuff out of the way, but you are going to be asked this. What have you done, right? You have researched this question. You've rehearsed it in your head. You've sat opposite a mirror and you've answered the question. What can you bring to the party? That is your opportunity. Spend 2-3 minutes really summarizing your skills, your greatness, but not in an arrogant way. Well, I've done this and I've achieved that and I can bring this and this is what I've done in the past and I know I can do it here and it's a fantastic job and it's a great opportunity. Okay, even though that might not get you it. But make sure you have a really well-practiced answer for that. Now, this third one I said, I've read a lot of research that says most interview decisions are made in the first 2 minutes of an interview. I actually believe that. I myself don't do that. Now, I'm not saying I'm anything special, but I do wait till I get to the end of the interview before I think, yeah, should we take this chap forward or not? But it is quite common. You walk in through the door, you shake the chap's hand, and within 2 minutes, that person's already decided. So in which case, what's the point? Well, it's good practice, right? Whether or not you get it, you still want to go through it. You still want to shine. Ignore the end result. Ignore the end result. Just shine, okay? The interviewer, to be fair to him or her, does want to check that you're a fit with the team. That's important. You could be the best technically qualified person for the role, the most experienced, the natural shoe-in, but if everyone else in the team is the opposite of you, or just not your character trait, then you're not going to get the job. And unfortunately, that's life, okay? That's the way it is. There's nothing we can do to control that, so all we can do is just make a good show ourselves. Now, dispelling the myths. First of all, remember we said it's not an opportunity, it's not something to be intimidated by. At the end of the day, they've asked you, you've got through the first hurdle, the CV review, the chap who's half of them in the bin. They've asked you, so they've obviously seen something in you. So back yourself to impress them, because they've obviously decided there's something in you that fits, in theory, okay? Ideally, they're not trying to catch you out, unlike this fellow at Credit Suisse. That's true. It's an opportunity to stand out or to tell them why you're a good fit. So it shouldn't be something to be intimidated about, okay? They need your help. What do we mean by that? Well, they clearly see this role needs filling, right? They've got a budget for it, they've got headcount, it needs filling. So they do need someone, okay, to come in and help the firm move along, all right? With that mindset, you think, okay, well, they need someone for this, that should be me, okay? Back yourself for that, all right? Is there anything you wanted to add to the they need your help bit, Roy?
Right, so the 2 keys to success. I'd say success boils down to 2 things, and I've listed it as confidence and preparation, and they're both interlinked. So in order for you to be confident when you go to an interview, you go through the stages of preparation that we've spoken about. Because when you do go there, you feel that you're armed with the knowledge that you require in order for you to do well. Confidence is how you portray yourself, your body language. Think about emotional intelligence. You might find yourself in a situation, I know some of you have been to networking events, you're speaking to someone, you're shaking their hand, they're not looking you in the eye, or you're speaking to someone, they're looking out the window. All right, you've experienced that, but when you go to an interview, the interviewer can do that, but you can never do that. So you must always make sure that you listen attentively to what they're doing and you maintain that attention. Another thing with regards to confidence is even down to the initial bits. So when you're waiting in reception, just make sure that you're very well prepared for when they turn the corner, when they come to you. The last thing you want to be doing is shuffling papers or trying to read the last bits of your script before you go into interview. As far as the preparation is concerned, just always think to yourself that I like to mentally have an opponent in mind and think that opponent is potentially as qualified as I am, has the same CV, has the same skill sets as me. But in order for me to give the advantage, I try and think of ways that I can prepare that the average person won't prepare. So what you might want to do is consider seeing if you could get an annual report, because although an annual report might seem quite boring, you might think that all you're going to see is the financial performance of an organisation. A lot of the time in the executive summary, you might find some things about the organisation's vision for the future, or some of the people that are on the board, or some of the new innovation and technology that they've had and that they've implemented. That kind of goes back to the point about getting material and literature about the organisation, but just try and be creative in your search.
What can one do about that gut feel? Now, in fact, I've just been reading something here that is a good yardstick, a good pointer. Irrespective of the 90 seconds or the 120 seconds, you want, as I said, during your, same for when you're during your probation period, you want to leave people with a positive impression of you. That's a gut feel thing. So you want people to have a positive feeling of you, and so in their gut, they think, yeah, this is the person I want to hire. And in an interview situation, the key there is to try and create this rapport so that they have a good feeling about you. Okay, and that down to the next point on these notes, the next slide actually, the 3 A's, authority, amiability, and attention. Let's do amiability first. As it says, be amiable. My yardstick is always treat people the way you want to be treated, which I think is a good way to live generally. But at an interview, trying to get a positive feel, a positive vibe, amiability, a nice smile, not a toothy grin, but a nice smile, it's just being open, being accepting, that helps to build that gut feeling, positive feeling in the person sat opposite you, okay? Authority, that is also in your control as well. You know, I think what they would have called deportment in the Victorian era. You know, obviously the way you dress, the way you carry yourself, a certain self-confidence about you, okay? And that's hard to do, especially if one isn't. I mean, nervousness is normal. You know, if I'm still, even today before a game of football, I'll need to run to the loo just before kickoff. You know, it's just normal. It's just, but you have to control that. So an air of authority, you know, is that you convey in your stature, in your deportment, in your dress, does help. Okay, amiability we've talked about. Attention. What do we mean by that? Energy, focused, good eye contact. You know, good body language. You know, always a positive feel about you. It's good to have your hands on view. You know, when you're talking, nothing wrong with a bit of. I'm doing it myself. Nothing wrong with a bit of, you know, expression. You know, you don't want to just sit absolutely still, but make sure that they're visible. You know, but keep the eye contact. Keep focused. Listen to what the person's saying. Something that I could do myself. Don't necessarily speak as fast as you would normally with your friends and family. You tend to find more senior people talk a little bit slower. This is a difficult mindset to get into, especially if there isn't even any hint of nervousness, is just to start talking faster, okay? Breathing helps, a nice deep breath before you go in. If you're waiting, often I find in many interviews, I'm shown into a room and the chap's not there. So I actually prefer that. When I went in for my 2 approval interviews, which, yeah, I got approved, so I guess they went okay. But when you walk into a room and there's 6 people opposite you, it's a little bit intimidating. I prefer to be shown to an empty room and wait for the fellow. When you're waiting for the chap, then breathing helps. Take a deep breath, control your nerves, you know, and then pay attention, okay? Pay attention, listen to everything that's been said, okay? And then don't necessarily answer straight away. You know, count internally in your head. Count a couple of seconds before you answer the question. Speak slower. Okay, that all helps. It helps an air of authority as well. Okay, I personally have no problem with someone who speaks fast. Okay, I have a trading floor background. You know, a lot of shouting and aggravation going on. I don't mind that, but it sometimes conveys an impression of, say, nervousness or lack of authority or lack of knowledge. You know, so do try and control that as well. And that's not. It's counterintuitive. I mean, I have to still work at it myself. Okay.
One of the things that I think is important to do, or that we've decided is important to do when you're delivering an interview, is to start strong. In doing that, we mean when you start, thank them for inviting you into for interview, and establish the higher baseline. What I mean by that is come in, make them aware that you've done some research in relation to the organisation. You don't have to tell them specifically what you've done, but you can tell them, look, I've read your annual report, I've read your news feed, I'm aware that you've won a new contract in a certain area, just to give you an understanding of the level of research that I've done. Because once you set that higher tone, then immediately they'll see you as a candidate that's at a higher level, rather than just going in, saying hello and waiting for them to say the first question. It's good to give them a quick little insight as to the level of candidate that you are, and that will potentially set you aside from the other people that you're interviewing against. The other thing is filling the gaps. So in relation to that, you have to always have in mind key bits of information that you want to deliver in that instance. So as you say, during the telephone interview, you might find things are going a bit silent. Use your emotional intelligence, use your listening skills to do an assessment of the type of conversation that you've had leading up to that point, and think in your mind about things that are relevant that you can use to build upon points as you're delivering them, and think about how you can lead the conversation into a two-way exchange where a point's being made, you're clear and concise about your response to that point, and you're talking about other things in relation to that organisation that are clearly linked to that point. So, for example, going back to the NHS interview example, I was asked if I had any questions at the end of the interview And what I did, because I'd done quite a bit of reading, I was able to refer to a report that was written by someone called Lord Carter. I knew that the NHS, some hospitals were under special measures. So I was always armed with discussion points that were not specifically related to just that back and forth Q&A. I was able to have general discussions maybe outside of that formal back and forth about my experience, and showed that wider knowledge in that area. Just leading on to the knowledge-based questions. When you do get to the point that you're at the end of the interview and they ask you if you have any questions, one thing that is important to do is to ensure that you ask questions that you wouldn't be able to find on the internet. So maybe you might think of listening to the interviewer, and what they intend to do with their business. You might say, all right, in my experience, I've found that innovation can be a good way for a business to expand in key areas. Have you adopted any new technology recently that has empowered the business in any way? Those types of things will create a more open discussion. So yeah, it's good to have some knowledge-based questions, or even if you're struggling for questions, you might ask them to expand on something that was brought up during the interview period. So you might revisit something that was said and say, all right, I noticed that you might have a bit of a limited or a risk-adverse approach. What is your appetite to risk in relation to this project? And that's a bit of a knowledge-based question. It shows that you was attentive during the interview process and gives them an opportunity to expand. So a lot of people, they have the interview and they just walk away like, all right, that's done. Let me get out of here as quickly as possible. One thing that is important to do is maybe bear in mind that it's a good opportunity to ask for some feedback. So you don't have to ask for feedback on it with regards to the interview as a whole, but you can ask them, before we part company, based on what I've told you, is there anything that you'd like me to elaborate on, or is there anything that you'd like to know a little bit more detail about me? That gives you another opportunity to shine and to maybe deliver some of the content that you might not have done during the interview itself. It's important to clarify the timing of next steps. It shows that you're keen, you want to know what's going to happen next. You might want to ask for a business card, depending on, I like to ask for a business card, but I try and judge it by the type of the feel that I get when I'm in the situation itself. Because once you get a business card, that means not only can you connect with the person on LinkedIn, you've also got their permission to email them, because they've obviously given you a business card. So you've got that more of a personal connection. So whether or not you are successful at an interview, you have them as a more firm contact. And more I'd mentioned before, when you're preparing for your interview, go on the person's profile, see who their second-tier connections are. That's great, but don't connect with them yet because you haven't met them yet. Once after the interview, that is the point when you can connect with the person. And that is the point that maybe once you've connected with them, you might be able to, if certain things have come up in the interview, you might want to share some articles with them. You might want to check some of the things that they're commenting on, or they're posting comments on, and maybe add some comments yourself, or like some of the stuff that they're doing, and show them that you're following them. Or if they've given you a business card, you might even go as far as to share an article about something that you discussed during the interview, because again, that sets you apart from the people that they've seen, and that builds that extra rapport level.